Here begins meeting number 1 in the deposition of Mr. David Sivella in the matter of David Sivella, plaintiff, versus Township of Lyndhurst et al. Defendants.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good morning, Mr. Sivella.
Good morning, Mr. Doris.
We are here to take your deposition today. I know you're familiar with the process, but I'm going to go over a few ground rules just so we're clear. Obviously, you're under oath, so your testimony today is just as important as if you gave it in front of a judge and a jury. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
And you swore to tell the truth, and I'm sure you'll do that, correct?
Yes, I will.
Can you just tell us your date of birth, Mr. Sivella? And what is your social security number?
I'm not saying
Objection.
that out loud.
So that is a confidential matter and would need to be designated as confidential. We're happy to provide it outside of the testimony, though.
Well, I think he could state it for the record, and we'll make sure that it's marked confidential. The court reporter
Sir.
doesn't have to take it down.
May I speak?
Sure.
You put things into the record confidentially, interviews with these gentlemen in IA, which I've honored. I've never looked at them because they were personal in nature about their personnel records. And you're asking me for my social security number, which impacts credit and everything else. And these gentlemen, we have an adversarial relationship and they're sitting in the room. And they've abused already, or they're alleged to have abused, systems of government for tracking information. So I am not giving you that number.
Well,
You
unfortunately...
you can get it from my attorney privately.
We will provide it.
Okay. One other important point to make. We have a confidentiality agreement in this case, which you should be aware of.
I'm aware it had to do with IA investigation, sir.
It has to do with a number of things. But we're proceeding with this deposition under that.
Not according to my agreement, personally. For the
I
record.
don't know what you mean by that, so
Meaning,
why don't you explain?
in no way, shape, or form have I agreed to make this private.
Make what private?
This deposition, any deposition, in this case.
Well-
I respected that the attorney, the former attorney, said that according to him, and he has been discharged for a variety of reasons, according to him at that time, those IA interviews needed to be kept confidential because according to you, I would post them on social media,
Okay.
which I did not even attempt to do. And those videos have been in my possession while I was without counsel, and I did not look at them out of respect for your wishes. So,
Well, one way or the other, we have to have this confidentiality thing sorted out.
All right,
So,
well, let me
gentlemen,
say
we
this.
didn't
you all
understand-
sort that out.
Yeah, well, here's how I would sort it
will.
out. The agreement as currently ordered by the judge indicates...
judge?
The previous judge.
Well,
whose
that's
name
an
I don't
issue- that's
recall.
an issue at
That's
hand,
an issue.
so-
All right. Well, but in any event, we will address that issue at another time. But the point is, any
perhaps today.
party can designate something as confidential, and then there's a procedure in there for if somebody objects to that confidentiality, how to review it. So, unless it's designated, by you or other parties as confidential, it's not automatically confidential. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's right, but it also included deposition transcripts and obviously video and things of that nature.
If designated.
Correct.
Right.
Okay,
Are
fair
you
enough.
so designating?
If I choose to, I'll do it after the deposition.
All right.
You had indicated earlier that you reviewed some things before your deposition today. Can you please tell me what documents you referred to
Sure.
in order to prepare for today's deposition?
Absolutely. I beg some tolerance here, if you don't mind. I'm going to go through them in chronological order, if you don't mind.
I don't.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So, would you just give me 1 second to return things to their files, because
Please
I'm getting a little older now. I have to be a little more methodical.
Yeah, take all the time you need.
Thank you, sir. All right. So, in preparing for this, would you like me to go through everything I reviewed?
Yes, please.
All right. I'm going to start with, and please, I beg everyone's tolerance in the dates seeming inconsistent with the current events, but they lead up to being relevant in the current events. You asked me earlier, am I married? I also have 2 adopted children. And at their adoption in 2009, January 16th of 2009, the proceeding was held in the Bergen County Superior Court. And at that time, I was the housing director, the executive director of the Bergen County Housing Authority. That position was attained because Joseph A. Fiero, the Bergen County Democratic chairman at the time, actually for quite some time prior to that, since 1998, this is now 2008 going into 2009, so the chairman for 10 years at that point, called me and asked me to attend my children's adoptions program. We had no invited guests. It was a technicality to us. We had gone through all of the background checks and things that you need to do. It was a pro forma event. But Mr. Fiero had been indicted 1 week prior to that. And I consented to his attendance because I felt he was in emotional need at a time of trouble. And even though I'm not personally friendly with him, my entire relationship with him has been political and professional. I will loosely call it professional, political. I agreed for him to come. And who here would like copies of things? So I've made copies for people. You, Mr. Doris?
No, thank you.
Nope.
No.
Would you like copies?
Only when we enter it as an exhibit.
Okay. No one wants copies, so just
No,
All right.
not right now.
okay. So these are photographs of that proceeding, and up here is me with my family at the table in the courtroom. Behind us is Joseph Fiero. Here's a picture of me, my husband, my 2 kids, and the judge in that case, Judge Lisa Perez Friscia. And here's a picture of Mr. Fiero in the same position Judge Perez Friscia was in at the same time and place. The proceeding went as they normally do, nothing eventful. But after the proceeding was over, Judge Perez Friscia, who I had never met before, pulled me aside and said, "Thank you very much for letting Joe come today." And I said, looked at her quizzically, "Why?" And she said, "Well, Joe and I are, we've been seeing each other." And I was incredulous, to say the least. Mr. Fiero and she disappeared from the room at the same time. I left. And I'm making note of this now because it becomes relevant as we go down the road. Anybody who wants these things, I'm going to put them back in the files. You can have copies. I make copies for everybody. So Judge Perez Friscia enters the picture. I reviewed these documents to confirm. I have not with me, but I can make available documents with her signatures on them, authorizing that adoption. Now, in 2016, April of 2016, the Township of Lyndhurst passed a joint consent agreement to build what at the time was called a junior high school. It had morphed over time into being called a middle school. It was during its construction, but at the time I'm referring to, it was always referred to as a junior high school, just in case people see documents and get confused. I hired an attorney named that was my neighbor, the plumber, John Corbone, Bergen County attorney, to challenge the legitimacy of the joint consent agreement of the Board of Education of Lyndhurst and the town commissioners of Lyndhurst in making a joint agreement to finance through the township the construction of a school building. I won't go into the technical background issues as to why that's improper, but there's plenty of record on that. That case went to Bergen County Superior Court. And in that court, it filed April 21st, 2016. Just so you know, I'll provide these, make copies. I'm referring to a document from Pashman Stein and an attorney named C.J. Griffin. It's a letter dated February 13th, 2021, and it outlines the history of this case because she is seeking, on my behalf, the files for this case that Mr. Carbone refused to turn over for quite some time, meaning a year.
Excuse me, I just have a clarification question. Mr. Carbone was your attorney?
That is correct.
And he was refusing to turn over documents to you?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And we have a record of that, back and forth. So, in this case, which Mr. Carbone did represent me, this case, which from my understanding now should have basically been an order to show cause or some sort of a rapid examination of the vote itself and an order for a revote if the vote was not taken properly. This case, through a series of permissions given by the Superior Court of Bergen County, dragged on from April of 2016 until June of 2017. And during that time, while this is going on, I think the case started out with a Greg Palladino, and then suddenly Judge Lisa Perez Friscia is assigned to the case regarding Lyndhurst. That is the same judge, to be clear, who did my adoption proceeding. Also, to be clear, I never met the judge during this proceeding. Mr. Carbone dealt with the court exclusively, along with Douglas Byrne, former freeholder, Democrat, under Joseph Fiero. I was a candidate for freeholder in 1999. I campaigned with Mr. Byrne extensively. He had been elected the year before. I can attest, based on my experience with Mr. Fiero that year, he was the county chairman, that Mr. Byrne is a loyalist to Mr. Fiero. He handled the matter for some third-party law entity. I don't believe you were involved in that case. Also involved in that case was another loyalist of Fiero, I believe, and Eric Bernstein. But anyway, the list of attorneys at the table is not as important as what occurred. So this matter that dragged on and on and on, which at that time I did not mind because I was awaiting a decision on my own behalf as to whether or not I would run for commissioner in May of 2017, which would have been a filing deadline of March. The more time this went on, I didn't ask any questions, quite honestly, because I thought, good, I can just redo this myself if I get elected, if I run. I never ran for a variety of reasons, and I think I've established quite well that I'm unelectable in Lyndhurst. But the issue that is highly questionable on this, and why I reviewed this document, is that depositions became part of this process, deposing Richard DeLascio over what I don't know. It was a vote having to do with whether or not they took public questions before or after the vote. It was not a question of whether or not the vote was illegal in and of itself, but the process of how they did it. But they did depositions and they dragged this on and on and on. In May of 2017, that election was held. Shortly after that election and the change of power in Lyndhurst, Judge Friscia signed an order sending it back to Lyndhurst to finally cast a revote in this case I had brought over a year earlier. And I remind everyone, if you lost track of the players here, Judge Friscia is the same person who told me in 2009, December 16, that she was romantically involved with Joseph A. Fiero. Bear with me. It will rapidly make sense. So, what occurred in June of 2017 is Carmine Lampe became township attorney.
Mr. Sivella, can I just interrupt
No,
you
you
for
cannot,
Well, I'm
but-
going to, so.
Well,
Just
let him say.
Just
He can
briefly. You realize the question that was asked was just what documents you reviewed to prepare for today's deposition. You know that, right?
I'm aware of your question. I'm answering in my...
In your way. Okay.
Thank
fair
you.
enough. I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to make sure.
Thank you. I'm answering in my way. Thank
Yes,
you.
of course.
But I appreciate your interest.
Thank you.
The June of 2017 reorganization meeting of the Township of Lyndhurst resulted in Carmine Lampe becoming the township attorney, and a repassage of the vote to approve the bonding of a new junior high school through the Township of Lyndhurst. In addition, as the summer of 2017 went on, other votes were cast. The architects were replaced. The construction manager was replaced. The construction manager is of particular interest to me, why I review these documents, because the construction manager was Epic Management, a contributor in totaling $90,000 to Joseph Ferriero's Democratic Party. Clearly, someone with a relationship with Joseph Fiero. The architects, DeCero and Rubino, are literally promoted on Woodridge Township stationery by Senator Paul Sarlo, who is also the mayor of Woodridge, and Chris Eilert, who is his chief of staff, not only in his legislative office, but is also the administrator of Woodridge. All of the contractors were replaced by people friendly to Mr. Sarlo or Mr. Fiero. So, I reviewed that document to refresh my memory about those things. And again, I will provide everybody with copies of these things, and I also freely admit that I am sharing attorney-client work product, and I know that opens up to discovery any of that particular attorney's communications with me, and I have no issues with that. But anyway, there was a deposition held in the township of Lyndhurst. The attorney representing me at the time, whose documents are not in here, was a Nicholas Doria. And you were in attendance, Mr. Doris, for the same reason you're here today, as the JIF attorney for the township of Lyndhurst. And the subject of the deposition was then Chief James O'Connor. Before that deposition started, and I do not have documents on this, I have notes, I checked the notes, but that's public record. That deposition was held on February 7, 2018. At that deposition, we were sitting across the table from one another, and you leaned over to me and said, "Do you know Joseph Fiero?" And I said, "Yes." And you said, "I know him very well." And I said, "That's nice." And then you went on to offer, voluntarily, as I was not asking you any questions about this, as my recollection, you went on to offer that you frequently visited him in prison, federal prison.
I'm sorry, I
You
frequently...
went on to offer to me
Right.
that you were so close to Mr. Ferrier, you frequently visited him in federal prison.
Oh, okay.
You can confirm or deny that as your pleasure. I'm sure there's a record of that.
No, I don't need to, but you can...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Carry on, please.
So,
It's very interesting.
yes, it is, to me.
I bet.
So, during this, you went on to say, well, I assume I asked you, well, why would you visit him, or looked at you oddly, because you went on to offer that you owed your job to Joseph Fiero, that you had been a Republican assistant county counsel under Pat Schuber and the Republicans in Bergen County, and that when the Democrats took control, that you went to Mr. Fiero because you were recently divorced, I believe you said, and you had a young daughter to support.
You're
And
sure
needed-
about all these facts?
I am sure of what you said to me, yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying it under oath, sir.
I know that. That's why I'm
That's
asking
why-
you to be
well,
cautious. But if you don't, you're sure of them, go ahead, please.
Well, I will try not to take you using the phrase "be cautious" as not a threat, but I am speaking.
It is certainly
I am
not.
speaking the
It's-
truth.
It's meant to be a friendly reminder
Of
that,
what?
that you are under oath and you need to tell the truth. But
Of
go
course,
ahead.
I'm well aware of that.
Okay, carry on.
So, at that time, you described to me that he saved your job in the county council's office and allowed you to stay, and you would have stayed under the county council, Esther Suarez. Now, Esther Suarez, for anybody who doesn't know who Esther Suarez is Esther Suarez is the Hudson County prosecutor currently. She was also Bob Menendez's choice for U.S. attorney and was rejected by the Biden administration because she was perceived as being the person Bob Menendez wanted as U.S. attorney to quash the investigation of Fred Davies. And it didn't quite work out. Now, back to my point. So, at this deposition, you say these things to me, and you remind me that you're very loyal to him. And I was bewildered by this. This is my own personal interpretation of this. I was truly bewildered why you were saying this and what this had to do with anything we were doing that day, other than the fact that I am not necessarily considered the most loyal person to Mr. Fiero because I cooperated with federal authorities investigating him before he went to prison the first time. The only time, as of now.
What's that?
The only time, as of now. Now, that deposition in and of itself is uneventful. However, after that, and that case was proceeding, that case against Mr. Carino was proceeding.
I'm sorry, just clarification.
Sure.
A lawsuit against Mr. Carino?
Yes, he was named as one of the people in the lawsuit. It was against the township of Lyndhurst. You're well aware you were involved in that case.
I'm
Oh,
asking
okay.
you.
You want me to explain?
No, I just want to clarify. You're saying he was a defendant in that other lawsuit.
I believe one of the named defendants.
Okay.
It was, I believe Carino, Letirio, Gengeruso as mayor, and the township of Lyndhurst as a whole. I may not have the entire list correct, but
But the people you named were definitely parties, you're saying?
the ones I just named,
Yes.
to the best of my recollection.
Okay.
All right. So at that time, months go by, and I receive a phone call from Joseph Fiero, who, an attorney of mine, told me he had been let out of prison recently, meaning it could have been a couple of months. So I'm going to place this just for the sake of the record, and I would say somewhere between our conversation in February 7th of 2018 and my phone call from Mr. Fiero was released from prison, to the best of my understanding. And he asked to see me. And for the same reason, I agreed to him coming to my children's adoption proceedings. I agreed to meet him for lunch in Hackensack, New Jersey. This would be about May of 2018. And at that meeting, it was at an outdoor restaurant on Prospect Avenue. He brought what he told me was his service dog. And we sat outside, and Mr. Fiero explained to me that he had gotten out of prison early because he was in an alcoholic rehabilitation program. That's how he got out early. As he sat there and drank Chivas on the rocks, not on the rocks straight, for, I'd say, several drinks. I was not drinking. And as he was doing this, he got down to business as to why he had called me to this meeting, why he asked to see me. He originally told me he wanted to do a website. We had done a website together years ago in politics, and that was the guise of the meeting. He wanted to do a political website and get back into the game, handicapping politics, that sort of thing. And instead, what it turned into was Mr. Fiero telling me, David, I don't want you to file another lawsuit against the construction of the school in Lyndhurst. And I looked at him like, what business be this of you? My town, my family's town. You don't live there. I don't even know if you ever entering the space before. Actually, I take that back. He did in 2008 when the last year when Friends changed party.
When what?
I'm sorry. In 2008, Richard DeLascio, Tom DiMaggio, Bobby Giangiarusso, and the incumbent Board of Commissioners all changed from Republican Party to the Democratic Party. And that was arranged by me. So Mr. Fiero was in town for that. But that was a decade before. So at this meeting, he's telling me not to file another lawsuit on this case. He proceeds to tell me that Carmine Lampe, the township attorney, had arranged for him to get, quote unquote, the title work for the construction of this new school project, and that I was to step out. And I just listened and looked, didn't say a word. He went on to say, I have a file on Senator Paul Sarlo, of criminal activities of Senator Paul Sarlo. And he has to do what I tell him. He repeated this multiple times. He further went on to say, I got Lou Stellato. For the record, Lou Stellato is the former mayor of Lyndhurst. And at the time of this meeting with Joseph Fiero, he was the Democratic County Chairman of Bergen County, Mr. Ferriero's former position before he went to prison. And he goes on to tell me that Mr. Stellato also owed him because he got Mr. Stellato his pension because Mr. Stellato was the county, I want to say coroner, although I know Mr. Stellato. I've worked for Mr. Stellato going back to 1989. He is a mortician. I understand quite a good one, but he's a mortician. I didn't understand what role he had as county coroner, but hey, all right. So he also went on to say that while he was in prison, it was arranged for him to get this work. You know, during the period of time you were visiting him in prison.
I'm sorry, I was visiting him?
If what I said is true according to you, but that can be verified, I'm sure. So,
I'm sure it can.
At that point, I had heard more than enough, and I left more than enough on the table to pay the bill, and I walked away. And I thought about what I had just heard for a couple of days. I was appalled, to say the least. And Mr. Fiero, these are copies of all of the phone calls between May 31st and July 26th of 2018. Phone call after phone call after phone call. And this does not include all of the calls that were hung up and the text messages, which I'd have to look for. And in these contacts, there's an increasing frenzy to speak to me because I realized Mr. Fiero was drunk. He said things that he should not have said or realized after the fact he should not have said. And as a consequence, he was extremely upset. I had two choices. One, call him back and participate in what I considered at that point to be a criminal conspiracy, similar to the one that sent him to prison in 2015, or I could do what I think any proper person should do in this situation, I could submit to an interview with the FBI, which I did in June of 2018. I also understand, I've been in politics since I was a teenager. I'm almost 63 years old. I started off working for a county chairman named Vincent Rigolosi. That is in the 1980s. Jimmy Checky, who's from Lyndhurst, was his close friend. I was 17, 16, 17, 18. I've been in rooms and watched those men decide who judges should be in Bergen County. I know how judges are appointed. I know the role state senators play in that. And Paul Sarlo specifically, a person,
And who?
Paul Sarlo, S-A-R-L-O, a person specifically involved in this Lyndhurst school project, decides who judges are in Bergen County. And just for the record as well, Mr. Schiller, I insisted he file this in federal court. He insisted it be filed in Bergen County Court. And because of the deadlines involved, and because at the end of the day, I always defer to the person with the license. I don't have one. It was filed here. And here we are with a judge who just happens to be the judge that Joe Fiero wanted to see one last time before he went to the big house, because she was his girlfriend, according to her, coming to my adoption. Judge Midzol, Dennis Ori's former law partner, assigning her that task. Then later, when I filed a lawsuit on the Lyndhurst schools to block the construction of that school, once again, she ends up ruling in that case, dragging it out just long enough so that within 30 days of the election in Lyndhurst and the change of power to Ferriero's controlled administration, the Stellato Ferriero administration, she rules and sends it back so they can reappoint all of the contractors to their favored people, including, according to Joe Ferriero's own words to me, himself. Midzol is the assignment judge. And then we end up here, gentlemen, in this case, which I did not want filed in Bergen County for the exact reasons I'm outlining here, but it was, and here we are. And lo and behold, Judge Friscia ends up getting this case as well.